We are back.
We're back for a second time.
This is round two, technical difficulties, but here we are to talk about strategy number 5 from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene.
Right. And the first one we had a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're back again.
So strategy 5, avoid the snares of groupthink,
Yes.
the command and control strategy. What is he trying to say with avoid the snares of groupthink?
Well, it's been proven that people in a group setting, okay, they have somewhat of a mob mentality, and a lot of times it's somewhat of an irrational type of behavior. That's proven fact. And so what he's saying is, hey, try to avoid that at all costs. Okay? Try to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
Be careful where the mob mentality might take you.
And when he says the command and control strategy, he's talking about the chain of command, right? So messages that are not communicated effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and in like the game of telephone, right? It starts with you're saying one thing, and by the time it gets to the other guy, it's a completely different message. So how have you avoided issues like this, or what issues have you come across where you wanted a message to come across and it came out? You run teams, you have employees you've had for many years, 30 years plus. So how are you able to deliver a message effectively?
You know, I've always heard and read that communication is an art, and I was not a very good communicator. And today I'm a little bit better, but improving constantly. Because you say one thing to someone, okay, and it's perceived differently than what you're trying to convey. And there's a real cute Instagram where the father is teaching the little son to play ball, and it's a t-ball, and the kid's got to be like 4 years old, 3 years old, or something like that. And the dad says, "Keep your eye on the ball, okay? Keep your eye on the ball." And the little baby goes up to the ball and puts his eye on it. I mean, that's exactly what the father said. Literally, keep your eye on the ball, okay? And so that's a really good example of how because Robert Greene is talking about war, and the commands that get sent out, if they're vague and not specific, by the time they reach the field, it's useless.
It's ineffective. Yeah. And
so you got to be very precise with your wording. And
so how do you do it? Because I've heard you many times say, hey, text doesn't work for me. You say that to people. I'm calling you because in text it's difficult to convey certain emotion. How do you do it?
So I try at all costs to try to be there. Like if I'm going to do something with my employees, we have a group session. I tell everybody, when is everybody available? We've got these carriers that have changed some things on us. Let's just have a powwow and let's just get together, and that way everybody's on the same track at the same thing. And that's
physically.
Physically.
Physically, you want to be present.
Yeah. Now I know we're using Zoom and stuff like that, which is also okay. But when you're there physically, you can look around and you can see at people's eyes and see if they're not fully understanding what is happening. If they have questions, you tell them, if you have any questions, come forth. Please ask, because sometimes I'm delivering a message that it's not complete, okay? Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, Robert Greene is very clear. If there's any break in the chain of command, the problem is on top, at the top. The top takes full responsibility for anything that happens in the field, especially in war. And he gives those examples, where, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Okay? So the chain of command, if your orders are not clear and concise and they're vague, They must be clear and concise. They cannot be vague.
And one of the things that Greene talked about was not being in the trenches. And when you're not in the trenches, and the example he gave was the military leader Hamilton,
Yeah.
which he was so far removed, and he didn't have the right people in the power positions to help him make his goal, let's say, in the attack on Turkey.
In Turkey. Mm-hmm.
He didn't have the correct people there. Some were, afraid, very conservative, and so he wasn't able to lead effectively the invasion into Turkey.
Right.
And they ended up, unfortunately, a small group of Turkish soldiers, right?
Yeah, in Gallipoli.
In Gallipoli, they were able to fend off these
20,000 men.
20,000.
20,000 men that had successfully acquired the beach. Okay? And their goal was only to travel 4 miles to pick up a high ground area in Gallipoli. And only a handful of Turkish fighters. Now, they were resilient and effective, and they fought hard.
Yeah.
But not that many compared to the 20,000. And because the orders were vague, it says that the officers were confused, and they didn't,
They interpreted it themselves as well.
Right.
Because it wasn't clear.
Correct.
It was vague.
And so, they took longer to approach those, that high ground. And what ended up happening is that they took a whole full day. And Turkish reinforcements came in 30 minutes prior to their advancement, and they were defeated.
They lost the day.
It's amazing.
Now,
It's amazing by 30 minutes.
Now, Greene talks about leading, and to lead, leadership takes subtlety. Leadership takes subtlety.
Yeah.
Because he's talking about the difference about when you're just giving commands and you're dictatorial as opposed to leading.
Right.
So how do you, with your team, with your employees, when you want something accomplished, how do you get that message across without coming off as a dictator?
So the way I do it is I go into every meeting with a sense of humility. And the reason I do that is because I give them a lot of credit because they are definitely in the trenches.
Right.
Okay? And I'm no longer in the trenches. I'm no longer writing policies. They are. And they're facing the customer day in and day out. A customer that potentially is upset, not happy, prices go up,
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of happy customers too. It's not just negative stuff, right? However,
They're taking the arrows.
they're taking the arrows.
They're the ones in the front line.
Right. And so I come in with that aspect, and when I provide information that has been delivered by the vendors, who better to get input from than the people that are in the front lines,
Right.
like my staff. And so I always say, what do you guys think? This is what is happening. What do you guys think? Please give me input. And I take that input very, very seriously. And then I adapt. And we come up with something that we can all live with.
So you're coming in with an idea, but you're willing to adapt that idea
Constantly.
based on the feedback you're getting from the people in the actual trenches.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Constantly. And I think so far for me it's worked very well, because it puts everybody in line with regards to a process. We create a process based on what has come in new. And we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And we're all in it together. We either sink or swim, we're all in this together. But everybody knows what is the process on something like the new rules or regulations that have come in. And they're constantly changing. I'm referring to my insurance agency, but we're in the real estate world. And of course, there's so many new changes like this lawsuit that came up, right?
Yeah.
for the sellers' commissions and so forth. All that stuff is new, so you have to play it by ear. You have to get informed and read up on things and be knowledgeable.
Yeah.
But there's always new things coming.
So delegating was a big topic, right? With this chapter also, because when you have teams, you have to know who to pick and what your weaknesses are, what you're going to delegate.
Pick up protege, right?
Pick a protege. And they used he used Dwight D. Eisenhower as the protege to, who was it? It was the protege to Marshall.
Yes, his name was George C. Marshall.
George C. Marshall.
He was Army Chief of Staff.
So Eisenhower was also very good at taking advice from Marshall. When Marshall was saying, you're going to need help in these areas, you should have a protege yourself. And he talks about, is it remote control?
It is.
So Greene's saying, look, you need to have people that you duplicate yourself with, that believe it and buy into your vision, but they're not just yes men.
Correct.
They are willing to challenge you when they think maybe something is not correct.
They need to have a mind of their own. It's important.
Independent thinkers.
Yeah, because for example, Robert Greene is very specific. He says, adapt your leadership style to the weaknesses of the people in the group that you pick. If there's a break in the chain of command, you're doomed.
Right.
So he says you have to adapt your leadership style to the weaknesses of the people that you're leading. And that's extremely important. In the prior podcast, we gave the example of one of my secretaries that I wanted to promote her to office manager. And she never wanted to become an office manager. She thought that the level of responsibility that came with that title was too much. And she was quite capable of doing it. And she worked for me for 25 years. And I tried throughout the course of those 25 years to promote her to office manager. And there was such a relentless pushback from her that I was never able to accomplish that. I had to find somebody else.
She didn't want the position.
No. And she was very capable. And at times she was doing things that were an office manager description type of thing. And I would tell her, and she said, but she never allowed me to. She felt totally uncomfortable with the title. Some people feel uncomfortable with the title. And then you have to pull back, because it's wise to be able to pull back.
Yeah. You can't force it, let's say, on her if, she's not ready for that role or want that role. So you have to pick somebody else.
Right. But she was my protege. I've been training her. And, for example, the current office manager that I have right now, when I approached her and I said, I need someone to be an office manager, I want you to be an office manager. And she said also, no, I don't want to be that. I don't want that. And I said, but you have the knowledge, the experience. Fortunately, I was able to convince her to become the office manager. She's an excellent office manager. And she's been my office manager for many years now. But initially, I got some pushback too. No, I don't want that title. No. Get somebody else. But there is nobody else better than you for that position. And so it's like Robert Greene says, it's an art. You want to lead by example. You don't want to be a totalitarianism type of, dictatorship. You need to be firm, but not weak. I mean, it's an art. And you have to learn to read people.
Yeah.
It's not that complex, folks. You just have to get in there and do it. It's not that complex. It's not that difficult.
We've talked about the saying, el ojo del amo engorda al caballo.
Yeah.
Which is the eye of the owner is what fattens fattens the cow or the horse.
The horse,
right?
yeah.
The horse. That's the actual translation. But it basically means the owner has to be present for things to get done.
Right.
What is your take on that?
I believe in that wholeheartedly. Look at our friend that you mentioned. He had a construction company. Share the story.
Yeah, he had a very successful construction company many, many years. He decided to retire and go to Mexico. And he would just come maybe a few times a month, or he would take long periods of time.
He would come, I think, twice a month. So he didn't retire. He actually was running the company supposedly from Mexico. He would come twice a month. And
That's true. He had somebody here that
His foreman.
entrusted. He entrusted this foreman with doing all the bidding and doing all the jobs. And when he came back, he found out that the foreman had been underbidding the jobs, meaning that he was saying that we could do this job for, let's just say, $500,000 to build this house or whatever the case, but it actually was going to cost
$600,000.
$600,000 or $650,000. So when this gentleman came back from Mexico, from his vacation, he realized this, and to protect his reputation, he actually was eating the difference. He was coming up with the extra costs because he wanted to stay true to the bids he had given.
He fired the foreman, the general manager.
He fired the foreman, the general manager. However, now this gentleman is no longer in the same location. His business has been greatly affected, his health, unfortunately. So,
and he's working out of his garage with a smaller crew.
Yeah. So he wasn't present.
No.
And then look what happened. Had he been present, he could have caught those things.
Or keep an eye on the numbers, because the numbers don't lie. And so what I think what happened is he gave too much power to the foreman or his general manager, whatever you want to call him, and he wasn't looking at the final bidding statement. What maybe should have been done, and of course hindsight is 20/20 for everything, right?
Yeah.
But maybe the answer there would have been, hey, look, go ahead and bid the jobs, but before the final say goes through, before that, you sign that document, I need to review it.
Yeah.
And I need to give it my seal of approval. If that would have happened, he would have realized immediately, hey, you're underbidding. What's going on here? But he didn't do that. And the foreman was, giving estimates left and right and underbidding, from what I understand, most of them. And even on the smaller jobs, he was underbidding by $40,000, $50,000.
Wow.
So,
it's
tremendous. And now it affects this guy. And he's no longer in Mexico. He's here full time, and he's working tremendously, and he's downsized. And, it's taking its toll.
He delegated also maybe to the wrong person. He picked the wrong person because Mark Cuban's always talking about he owns many, many companies, or is majority owner or part owner of many companies. But he has somebody who's like running the company. He picks that person, I think usually from within the company. So he'll acquire a company and he'll bring somebody who understands the business and is already in that business to run it.
Right.
And that person reports to him or somebody below him, and then that person reports to him. So he's able to own many companies and delegate that role. And I've shared with you about an insurance agent that I know that has been running their business for over 40 years, and they need to be in the office because they believe that the office will now run, and they're very successful financially.
Will not run what? Properly without him?
Yes, it will now run the way that it would run if he was there. But then now you're tied to the business and you're a slave to the business, because now if he loves the business and he loves doing that, then you can say, well,
all good.
He's not a slave to it. He loves it.
It's all good.
But you don't have the freedom that like you've been able to have, because you designed it, you built the business where you really have people that are good that report to you, and if you need to, you step in. But you're able to have other endeavors, open businesses with me, open this start this podcast, do other things that this other gentleman can't do.
Right. You know, it depends on the goals of the individual, because
Yeah.
I know the gentleman you're referring to, he's extremely successful. Okay? Um, and he goes in every day early in the morning, and he's probably the first to be in there and the last one to go. He loves his, work, so it's probably all good. Maybe at one point he'll get a little bit old, maybe, I don't know. He's been doing it for 40 years and going strong. The thing is that to delegate, okay, to somebody else, business power, decision making abilities, it's extremely difficult. Extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And you're looking at one person that in the beginning I always thought nobody's going to do the job like me. In order for it to get done well, it's I got to do it. And that was my premise and my thought when I started. There's something to that, but you can create processes and put them in place and train someone to follow those processes. And then that will get done, and you'll have the freedom to be able to run the business, like Greene says, from remote control to a certain extent.
From a telescope.
Yeah. You can't get away all the time like this gentleman that left to Mexico. That's something you cannot do. You might as well, at that point, if you're going to do something like that, sell the business. Okay? Because you have to be there. The numbers have to make sense. And you have to... I think also it motivates your employees to see you. You're leading a pack, right? And so... you have to be there to a certain extent.
What is the quote of that Greene talks about, the rider and the horse?
Oh, that was very interesting. He said, an army is like a horse. Okay? It reflects the temper and the spirit of the rider. If the rider is uncertain and uneasy, that rider is going to transfer that feeling through the reins to the horse.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Amazing.
And so if a rider, the owner of a business or the head of a household, is not present,
or is uncertain or uneasy,
or uncertain or uneasy, yeah,
he's going to transfer those feelings to
his
the
team,
horse, his team,
his family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That's the very difficult thing. Some people have really struggled with delegating.
Absolutely. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But if you don't do it, you run into other issues, folks, because if you're running a business, how do you scale your business when you're tied down to all the petty things that come through the business?
Yeah, if you handle everything.
If you handle everything. In the beginning, I did. And I had to, delegate in order to be able to grow.
Yeah.
When you delegate, you do lose, like you said the other day, you lose the contact, right?
Yeah,
the touch with the
relationship, because you're not face to face with them. Somebody else is handling the business, the transaction, the cultivating of the relationship. Yeah,
the producers that you bring in are building that relationship,
and you're, as the owner, you no longer are.
That's right. So you do give up something, because I remember I knew my clients' names. I knew their kids' names. I knew the name of the dog and the cat and all that stuff. And that's a beautiful thing. Okay?
I think that's why some people rather keep that than delegate. However, you have to understand what you're giving up, freedom. And so if you're okay with that, then that's how you run it. You wanted something different. You've always seemed to want to try new businesses and endeavors, so you didn't want to be fully tied on the day-to-day things in the insurance business, because then it wouldn't have let you try real estate and other things.
Right. Correct. And there's no right or wrong. It all depends on which way you want to go. And some people delegate and fail, and some people
That's true.
delegate and succeed.
That's true.
And the people that are running their businesses hands-on, God bless them for it, and maybe that's what they want to do, and there's nothing wrong, with it either.
Well, according to Greene, you can't lead an army like that. If you're talking about leading 20,000 men. Now, remember Braveheart?
Yes.
And Mel Gibson, William Wallace gets to the front of the front line when they're about to go into battle. And he pumps up his team. There's something to be said about being present and in the trenches with them.
Oh.
Because what kind of leader? I mean, you'll die for that leader who's willing to die also.
Yeah, and that was something that Napoleon had. He went and fought up in the front lines with his people, and he got injured many times until, I believe, one of his colonels, Robert Greene, is a master at the Napoleon history. I mean, I think he's read every single book. One time I saw him on an interview where he says there's a book that's very heavy, but it's like 10,000 pages or something
On
like
Napoleon?
that. On Napoleon war strategies.
Wow.
Because he was a genius, okay? Napoleon. And Greene too. Anyway, and so, you just can't. Some people have this magnetism, okay?
Yeah, charisma.
This charisma that you can pump an army and go and, like Hannibal. He gives the example of Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae. The Romans outnumber Hannibal by 3-1 or 4-1, and yet Hannibal destroyed them. And why? Because the Romans, their generals, were fighting each other because they didn't agree on the way this war was supposed to be fought there. And then the story says they fought each other almost as much as they fought Hannibal. But Hannibal was one leader, one chieftain. He made his decisions quickly and swiftly. They were carried out swiftly. And the Romans were arguing with each other which way to go, and they were getting pummeled. And so there's something.
There wasn't a clear chain of command.
No.
Yeah.
And that's another thing he says. If you're given a position where your chain of command is shared with somebody else, step back and let them have it.
Don't take it.
Don't take it.
That was very interesting advice Greene is giving. Because you would think of it as it's a promotion, but no, you don't have full control. You have to share it. Pass on it.
Pass on it, because he says that what's going to happen there is you're going to lose the battle and the war, and you're going to get blamed for it.
Yeah, both heads will go, let's say.
Yeah.
Too many cooks in the kitchen. And there has to be a leader and then somebody that reports to them, and it's clear, right? That's why you wanted to establish a manager in your agency, somebody who issues could go to them and then they would take them to you if needed.
Right.
That's super important. It's interesting how, like I was with our good friend Dan, he was sharing during the fires that happened here in California.
Yeah.
There was, some experiences of maybe not the best communication within even, the different organizations. And so you're trying to fight a fire, but one person may not know that the other person, hey, the fire already caught around that hill, and there was not clear communication in some areas. And, I'm sure like that, it's in any business. Just unfortunate. And like a doctor who's doing surgery could not be clear and isn't given proper information. Didn't you say that happened to Kevin Costner's children when they were in the hospital?
Not Kevin Costner.
They were given the wrong...
No, that was not Kevin Costner. That's the other guy that's very famous too. He did the movie that I like so much, Frequency.
Dennis Quaid?
Dennis Quaid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had twins. And from what I understand, they struggle to have children. And then all of a sudden they have twins. And somebody made a mistake and gave him.
A doctor, right?
It, well, it comes from the top. The doctor has to take the blame, but a nurse gave them a tremendous high dosage of heparin to the twins, and they weren't clotting the blood, and so they almost passed away. Almost. Thank God they were able to, revert that, and oh my goodness. Yeah.
So how did that happen? They gave, who gave that order? Let's say who put in that
I don't
request?
think that the request was not okay. In this particular case, nobody gave. Let's say, because the dosage that was given to them was.
So it was just a mistake.
It was just a genuine mistake.
Wow.
Not reading
Properly.
.005 and putting 5.0. There's a huge difference, right, between .005 and 5.0,
Yeah.
and so that was a genuine mistake. That was not something that was said, oh, I want you to give him 5.0 of heparin or whatever, and I don't know the dosages, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a genuine mistake in not reading properly the orders that were set forth.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the leader, like you said, Greene says too, has to take the blame.
The person on top.
I remember one time, one of my team member employees made a mistake, and the customer was very upset, and I had, at the end of the day, had to take the hit because my employee was getting very flustered and very wasn't able to handle well this customer, and put him on hold right away because they were getting very upset at the employee. And so I had to take the call, and I had to, I'm so sorry, I made the mistake, this and that. And I told the employee that, hey, it's all right, I took the blame for this or whatever. But she didn't take it well. She didn't handle that confrontation well.
Well, some people don't handle confrontation well.
Some people do not handle well. I think you even had some employees that hung up on the customer and stuff like that in the past, right?
Yeah.
And you have to address that with them. Hey, look, you can't do that.
They're tough.
You can't do that.
Some of these women are very tough.
Yeah, you can't do that, but you also have that fine line of where, hey, if they're disrespecting you,
right,
you're gonna step in.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. So, who's the guy that owns Virgin Airlines?
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson says that the most important people in his organization are his employees.
Right.
And he's gotten a lot of backlash for that because people say, no, the most important people are your customers. And he says, no, my employees are the most important people. I take good care of my employees. By doing that, okay, everything else falls into line and my customers are being taken care of because
very interesting.
I protect my employees.
You've always said, hey, the customer is the one that puts
the food on
our table.
Yeah.
So you gotta make sure the customer is the most taken care of. But it's an interesting way he looks at it.
The one thing that I don't allow, because most of my employees have been ladies. I've had men too. Okay. I don't allow anybody to be disrespectful with any one of my employees, ladies or men. Okay. So I tell them, if somebody's using foul language with you, you are going to tell them, hey, listen, I need you to not do that. I don't appreciate your language, and just warn them once. And if they continue to use foul language, go ahead and hang up on them, and then let me take over. And I've done that many a times. And I've defended my staff because I know what they're capable of.
Yeah.
They're good people, and they have my back. And the least I could do is have their back too.
Well, you earn respect as the leader in doing something like that.
Yeah.
I shared with you that book that was recommended to me. I haven't read it yet, where leaders eat last.
Oh, wow.
is the name of the title.
Wow,
And that's
I
kind
love
of,
it.
yeah, it kind of puts it in perspective. Like, yeah, you take care of your people first, you take care of the client, you take care of your employees, everybody, and then you'll eat if there's food.
What is it? Leaders eat last, right?
Leaders eat last.
Yeah, I have it here.
Yeah, it's a cool title.
And you know, it Green is also saying, look, you have to, what you said just recently, a few minutes back, you have to empower your people
Yeah,
so that they're not, what was the word he used? Automatons or whatever. So they can think on their own 2 feet.
they're not robots.
They're not robots, you know? And he's warning us about the group mentality because he says madness is the exception in the individual, but it is the rule in the groups. So when you're caught up in this group mentality, you have to be very, very careful in what direction that group is going into. Be careful. Because, you know, madness is...
Don't lose your individuality. That he brought up, if you see somebody that hasn't been able to hold a job too long with one company or employer, that's a good person to consider as part of your team because they don't conform. I thought that was interesting. And the time that they're with you, they can do a lot with you, right? And then they will move on one day. Because that's another thing I feel employers get stuck in the mindset of, I want this person to stay with me forever so I don't have to retrain somebody new because that takes a lot of time and training.
Oh.
Or I don't have to deal with new employees and their issues. I already know the issues this one has, for example.
Well, it's interesting. 2 points on that. When you're jumping from job to job, that's not necessarily a positive thing in a resume.
Well, how many jobs did Robert Greene have?
A ton of them, and look at him now. Okay?
Maybe you're not meant for a job.
You're
meant for something else
something
one
bigger.
day. But you're right. There are people that just jump job to job, and not necessarily moving up.
Right. But when you're leading a team and you're talking about training employees,
Yeah.
I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and we have mandatory meetings that we had to send our employees to this big facility. And what was happening is that there were people there that were telling the employees, hey, how you doing? You happy with your job? Yeah. Well, if you're not, here, you can call me here and you can come and apply over here and I'll hire you. So the carrier was telling us, hey, these are mandatory meetings that you have to send your employees to, but it was becoming a poaching kind of thing where they were taking employees and offering them a position by other agencies, right?
Yeah. Your competitor.
My competitor. So what I ended up doing is I stopped all outside training. And I said, from now on, all training will be in-house. And that didn't work well with the carriers.
Yeah.
And I got into a lot of trouble for that.
Well, you were protecting your forces.
For sure.
But,
because, you train and it takes a long time for somebody to come and just, but it's, that's happened to me often where my employees get, it happens to everybody, not just me.
Yeah.
The competitors are always looking for the top salesperson and they're going to get a job offered.
Sure.
And, I have nothing against people looking for better opportunities to feed themselves and their families. Okay? In the beginning, I was thinking, I got to be careful with this and that and whatever. But the reality lies in that if they're going to improve their lives, go for it. Because I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to improve my life for myself and my family. So why should not them, right?
Correct.
And so it's got to get,
I think also this goes true where you have people that think for themselves. You want that in an employee.
You want that.
You want some, hey, give me some ideas.
Absolutely.
Instead of, I remember there was this one, and I'm learning, and I failed a lot, and
Same here.
Still failing, and
Same here.
being humbled.
Yeah.
I've had an employee that I would ask her, what ideas, this and that, and she wasn't able to come up with her own ideas. I had to provide the ideas, and then, well, whichever one you think is best, as she would answer. But I wanted somebody, so, that wasn't the person for that job or position, maybe. She was maybe good at other things.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
So this particular person is probably excellent at following directions.
Very much. You needed to be very clear, and I wasn't very clear at the time.
Well, that's your fault then.
Yeah, so I wasn't very clear, but you're right. Militant. If you gave a directions, this person to the T.
Okay, then that person has a tremendous amount of value.
Yes.
Not in the position that...
Creative ideas. No.
You know how hard it is to be creative? I have a tremendous problem with that. I'm trying to learn to be creative now.
Go ahead.
Because I was always... What's the word that I always use? I'm very...
Practical?
Huh?
Practical?
Practical.
Yeah, you are.
Very practical. And being practical, I think, to a certain degree, muffles your creativity. I'm learning to become more creative.
There are things you can do.
I'm learning to become more creative. So it's like we went somewhere the other day. It was a restaurant. And the person in the front was all grouchy and this and that. And you said, hey, that's not the person, that's not the guy to put up in the front. That guy, you got to put him in the back. Because that guy is chasing business away. And, you got somebody in the front, they got to have a smile.
Welcoming,
great attitude, welcoming.
That's the owner, that's the employee, the manager who needs to see that.
Okay.
Who needs to say, hey, you know what, I got this guy's, this is not the job for you. The leader has to do that.
Right. So the person that couldn't be creative and give you ideas, there's nothing wrong with that. Because I would struggle with that. I can put myself in their position. But if you give me a task to perform, I will finish that task on time, maybe before it's due. And if I will follow procedure.
Yeah, you're good at that.
I'm good at that. That takes discipline. So that person has a great deal of value.
But you do want people, especially if you're going to delegate, you want people that don't just follow orders. You also want somebody who can tell you if they think that the order you're giving is maybe not the best approach.
And that happens a lot.
You have to find
to me, because my employees are in the trenches, so I'm always constantly asking for feedback.
Right.
Or constantly. If you think that you know it all, you're done.
Yeah.
You did. Because you're not facing reality.
One of the quotes from the book is, an individual can be bold and creative. A group is often scared of risk. So that's what you're talking about, the groupthink.
The group mentality is... He also says, be careful of the glittering resume, okay?
Yeah.
Make sure you take a look at the psychological makeup of the person. And that comes out through questioning when you're having an interview, We see it at Portos all the time, right?
Yeah.
People are getting interviewed left and right. And they have it down to a science. There's questions that you can ask, that you can find out the strength and the weaknesses of that particular person, because we all have strengths, and you just, based on your strength, you put that person in the proper position.
Yeah, it's like a profiler. After a while, these hiring managers, they become like profilers. They can tell the way you carry yourself and what you wear, and
correct.
And even though they may on paper not look like the best candidate, they have a desire to learn and move up. And if you're good at hiring and you can read people, it's all psychology. That's why these books for me are very impactful, because day to day we interact with people, different dealings, in negotiations, in real estate and other ventures. You're dealing with people's psychology and emotion, and it's all a dance, and these books Greene is he's studied it very, very thoroughly, Politics is the biggest threat to your organization. That's what he says in this chapter. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. There was a time when there was this lady that she was coming up with good ideas. And, you have to reward somebody when they come up with good ideas. But it ended up being that she wasn't. It was somebody else who was a little bit more mellow, more quieter, and very nice. And she had come up with several of those ideas, but this other lady was taking credit for it. And so that's politics within the office.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I remember that, and I remember saying to, the other lady, why didn't you tell me this was your idea? Oh, well, I didn't think much of it or whatever, but it's definitely not hers. I came up with that idea. And so you have those issues that come up within an agency, within an office, within a group of employees,
Yeah.
and you have to be very, very careful. And
Yeah.
fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not big enough that I ever dealt with unions. I hear
Oh, wow.
that unions, it's difficult,
They're a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I mean, there are,
There's positive to it, maybe.
positives to being in a union and sometimes a little bit negative things. So I've heard both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah, because we know many people that have had to negotiate with unions.
Well, your grandfather, my father-in-law, was a union worker, and he loved it.
Yeah.
And he spoke great things about the union.
I'm sure there are good unions.
Yeah, because
and
they took care of,
they're supposed to be there to protect the employee.
Right.
That's that's the intention. But politics, there's so much politics
Right.
behind it. I mean, it's not I can see how he says this. Politics is the biggest threat to your organization, because let's say that I'm bringing the best product or service for your organization, but there is a gatekeeper from me to you, and I have to get through that gatekeeper. And that gatekeeper doesn't like me, and they have a relationship with somebody else who isn't doing the quality of work, let's say, that I can do, but they have a relationship. And that's politics, that they're going to put the other person in front of you to get the contract, the dealings, whatever the case, instead of the person with the best product or service. That's what Greene is saying.
Oh, and he's right on the money, too.
I think he's right on the money.
Well, you lost a big case that you had written.
To the FBI. You reminded me of Rush Hour. Big case.
Big case with
I
the
lost
FBI.
the big case.
Yeah.
Which one?
Where the principal of a certain school never reached out to you upon renewal and just gave the thing away to somebody else.
Right.
And
Right.
you called up for the renewal, and you had been in touch with all the teachers and everything.
Yeah, I had been several years, maybe 4 or 5 years, around that, let's say 5 years, working for this school, doing as a contractor, I guess you could say, to this school, right? Helping them with their insurances and for all their employees. And then all of a sudden the school gets a new president or principal. And then they felt we need to cut costs, this and that. I don't know if they had a relationship, I'm not sure, with another person, insurance person. And so all of a sudden I'm told, we're going with somebody else this year. After I had been 5 years working, cultivating, building relationships with the staff and the faculty, the teachers, and really enjoyed that work, even though it was very time consuming.
Right.
But I really enjoyed it. And then all of a sudden, I'm being replaced. And I wasn't even notified by this person. It was through another person. Hey, we're going with another company this year. And I thought, man, I didn't even get the courtesy of
a phone call.
If the other person was providing a better service, better for the employees, this and that, I understand. But there was never a cost analysis. It was never a comparative.
I doubt it.
It was never competition. It was
I
never.
doubt it. Because we found out later on what company it was and stuff like that, and so
It was simply, these guys are saying they could do it for less, we're going with them. It was never, well, what actually is being provided. It's like,
yeah, they never looked at coverage. I mean, it was not a good thing.
yeah.
But that's an example of politics. You had a new principal that came on board, and
Well, I said it, politics is potentially the boardroom, the board of trustees to a school, company, organization that destroys that organization. Look at Steve Jobs was fired. I think Elon Musk was also kicked out. I think, but for sure, Steve Jobs was kicked out of Apple.
oh yeah, for sure, yeah,
So, and I think he went and created another company
that's right,
that was a competitor to Apple at that point.
yeah, and then they brought him back.
And then they brought him back. So, you know, these boards, and you know, when you go public with a company and you create all these issues because you have people that are not in the trenches and they're not looking out, let's say, for the best for the consumer anymore. It's simply maybe cost. And Greene talked about, what did he say about what did I lost my train of thought, but it had something to do with these boardrooms and these organizations that are out of touch and they end up destroying organizations.
Well,
Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but
well,
we
once
covered
again,
a lot.
oh, there was a lot. Once again, this chapter is tremendous.
Yeah.
Yeah, the group mentality is dangerous. You know, he says that a lot of times some of their ideas are irrational, so beware. You know, madness is the common thing in group mentality, and it's the exception in the individual. So, you know, there's something to be said about that. He says you can be a delegator, but not a manipulator. So there's a lot of great points in this chapter.
Yeah.
Read it, folks.
Well, that wraps up Avoid the Snares of Groupthink.
Sounds good to me.
We'll thank you
Convene
everybody.
for the next
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for listening and joining us in this journey. And next week we'll hit strategy 6.
That sounds good.
Thank you.